Hey, my name is Jonah Bell. I'm 33 years old, and I bake bread for a living in a town called Harmon, in a little shop on the corner of 2nd and Vine with a flat up above it where I sleep, or mostly don't. Bell's Bakery, the sign says in my grandmother's handwriting that I had a man trace into the glass when she passed and left me the place. I'm what they call a night baker, which means my day starts when everyone else's ends. I go down to the shop around 2 in the morning, and I light the ovens and I bake in the dark and the quiet while the whole town sleeps, so that when Harmon wakes up, there's warm bread on the shelves and the smell of it out on the street. And nobody ever thinks about the man who was up at 3 a.m., with his hands in the dough to make that happen. That's the job. You give people warmth, and you stay invisible. And I want to tell you something true right at the start, because it's the whole shape of me and you'll need it to understand the rest. I have spent my entire life being the warm thing in the background of other people's lives, and somewhere along the way I decided that was all I was. My grandmother raised me in that flat and taught me the sourdough starter that's older than I am, and she loved me, but she died, and after that it was just me and the ovens. I had a woman once, a good one, for a couple of years, and when she left she said the kindest, cruelest thing anybody's ever said to me. She said, "Jonah, being with you is like this bakery. It's so warm and so easy, and it always smells like home. But nobody falls in love with a bakery. They just stop in on their way to somewhere else." And she left, on her way to somewhere else, and I decided she was right, that I was the bakery, not the man. The thing people love and no one chooses. So I baked. I fed the whole town and I stayed invisible, and I told myself the warmth going out the door every morning was enough, that a man could live on being the background, and I almost believed it. Right up until 2 o'clock on a rainy Tuesday morning in October, when somebody knocked on the wrong door, and my whole invisible life came looking for me at last. I was down in the shop, flour to the elbows, working a batch of rye when I heard it. Not the shop door, which is glass and rattles. The other door, the private one at the side that goes up to my flat, the one nobody uses because nobody comes to see me at 2 in the morning. 3 knocks, fast and frightened and quiet, the knock of somebody who is sorry and scared in equal measure. I wiped my hands and went to it, and I opened it, and the cold rain came in first. And on the little covered landing stood a young woman soaked through in a gray hoodie with the hood up, arms wrapped around herself, shaking. And the second the door opened, she said, in a rush, low, almost a whisper, "I'm so sorry. I know this is the wrong door. I know it. But there's a man in the lobby, and I can't go back down there, and I saw your light, and please, please, can I hide here just for tonight? Just tonight. I won't be any trouble. I have nowhere else, and I can't be found right now." I have thought about that moment a great deal since, because a sensible man, a careful man, closes that door. A strange woman, 2 in the morning, a man in the lobby, hiding. Please don't let me be found. That's a whole world of trouble on your doorstep in the rain. But I looked at her, at the exhaustion in her face under that hood, at the particular way she was braced for me to say no, braced the way you only get from a whole lot of practice at being turned away. And I thought about all the mornings I handed warm bread out a door to people who never once wondered about the man who made it, and I stepped back and I opened the door wide and I said, "Come in out of the rain. Kitchen's warm. You can hide behind a lot of bread." She came in, and she stood dripping in my flour-dusted shop, looking like she couldn't believe the door had actually opened. And I got her a clean towel and a stool by the oven where the heat was, and I put the kettle on, because a man who is boiling water is a man who is safe to be near, and I wanted her to feel that in her bones. I didn't ask her who she was. I didn't ask her who the man in the lobby was, or what she was hiding from, or any of the 100 questions stacking up. I just went back to my rye, because the dough doesn't wait for anybody's drama, and I let her sit in the warm and the quiet and the smell of baking bread and be, for a while, unbothered, and I watched out of the corner of my eye as the shaking slowed and then stopped, and as she pulled the hood back off wet dark hair and looked around my little shop like it was the strangest and safest place she'd ever been. "You're not going to ask," she said finally. "Ask what?" "Anything, who I am, what I'm running from." "None of my business," I said, folding the dough. "You needed a door. I've got a door. The rest is yours to tell or keep. You want some bread?" First loaf's about to come out. It's rye. Nobody appreciates a good rye anymore. It's all sourdough and grievances out there. That got the smallest laugh out of her, cracked and surprised, like a laugh she'd forgotten she had. And when the loaf came out, I cut the heel off it, the best part, still steaming, and put a little butter on it and handed it over on a square of parchment. And she took it and bit into it, and then she went very still. And then, to my complete alarm, she started to cry. Not loud, just tears running down while she chewed, and she put her free hand over her eyes and said, muffled, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's just, nobody's given me anything in so long. Everybody wants something. And you handed me the best part of the bread and you don't even know my name." "I'm Jonah," I said gently. "Now, somebody's given you something and knows your name." So that excuse is gone. She laughed again through the tears and wiped her face and said, "Nell, I'm Nell." And I believed her, because it was 2 a.m. and there was no reason on earth for a soaked, exhausted, weeping girl to lie about her first name to a baker. And I had no idea, none, that the name she gave me was the only true thing about her identity that the entire world did not already own. Because here is what I did not know, being a man who works nights and hasn't turned on a television in 3 years and thinks the internet is mostly for looking up whether a mushroom will kill you. The young woman crying over rye bread in my bakery was, to the rest of the planet, Vivienne Vale. And Vivienne Vale was, that very week, the most looked for woman in the country. She'd been a famous child, and then a famous teenager, and then, for a decade, one of those faces you cannot escape in a checkout line. A movie actress so well known that she had not walked down an ordinary street without being photographed since she was 15 years old. She'd been shooting a film 2 towns over, and 3 days before she landed on my doorstep, some ugly private thing about her had been splashed across every screen in the world by people who'd decided her pain was public property, and she had done what I would come to understand she'd been dreaming of doing her whole manufactured life. She'd walked, slipped her security in the middle of the night, pulled up a hood, and run, with no plan and a dead phone, trying to reach the apartment of the one location assistant who'd been kind to her, and she'd gotten the building right and the floor wrong, and a photographer who'd been tipped off had walked into the lobby below just as she reached the landing. And she had knocked on the first door with a light behind it. Mine, she didn't tell me any of that the first night. She just ate the bread and watched me bake till the sun came up, and somewhere around the 4th batch she fell asleep on the stool with her back against the warm brick of the oven, and I took off my apron and laid it over her like a blanket and let her sleep, and I kept baking, quiet as I could, keeping a kind of watch over a stranger I hadn't kept over anybody in years. There is a particular peace in a bakery in the last dark hour before dawn, the ovens ticking, the dough rising slow under its cloths, and I had spent 1,000 of those hours alone and told myself I preferred it. That night, with a sleeping stranger in the warm and the smell of rye filling the room, I found out I had been lying to myself for a very long time. The peace was better with someone in it. I hadn't known. You can forget a thing like that so completely you'd swear you never knew it. She was supposed to leave in the morning. She didn't. When Harmon woke up and the shop filled with the regulars, Nell stayed up in my flat with the door shut, and when I closed at noon and came up, she was still there, sitting on my couch with her knees pulled up, and she looked at me with a question all over her face, the same one from the landing, and she said, "Can I? Is it all right if I stay one more day?" I know I said just tonight. I haven't felt safe in a room in a long time, and I feel safe in this one, and I'm not ready to give it back yet. And I said the truest thing, which was, Nell, you can stay as long as the warmth holds. There's more of it than I know what to do with. One more day became a week, and that week was the strangest and best of my life. She hid out in the flat and the back of the bakery, and slowly, day by day, she came out from behind whatever she was hiding from. She started coming down at 2 with me to bake, and I taught her to knead, and she was terrible at it, and got flour in her dark hair and on her nose, and laughed, really laughed, this bright, unguarded sound, and she said one dawn, elbow deep in dough. Do you know I've had 6 personal trainers and 3 chefs, and I have never once, not one time, been allowed to just make something with my hands and eat it? Everything I put in my mouth for 15 years has been decided by a committee. And I filed that away, the 15 years, the committee, along with all the other little wrong-shaped facts. And I didn't push. Because whoever she'd been before my door, in my bakery she was just Nell, who was bad at kneading and loved my rye, and I could see that being nobody in my flat was the first vacation her soul had had in a decade. She learned the bakery the way a kid learns a grandparent's house, one warm corner at a time. She figured out which floorboard in the flat creaked and started stepping over it. She found my grandmother's starter in its crock and named it, of all things, Gerald, and fed it every morning and got weirdly proud of it. In the slow hour after the noon close, she'd sit in the front window with a book from my grandmother's shelf and watch Harmon go by outside the glass, ordinary people running ordinary errands, and once she said, not looking at me. Do you know I can't remember the last time I watched people who weren't watching me back? This is the most exciting afternoon I've had in years, Jonah. I'm watching a man argue with a parking meter. It's magnificent. One night we couldn't sleep, and I taught her to make cinnamon rolls at 3 a.m., and we ate them straight off the tray, too hot, burning our fingers, and she got icing on her chin, and I reached over without thinking and wiped it with my thumb, and we both went still, and neither of us made a joke to cover it, and I understood I was in a great deal of trouble. She told me things, in the flour and the dark, that I don't think she'd told anyone, about being 9 years old and already the family's income, about learning to cry on cue for a camera before she'd learned to cry for herself, about how the private thing that had chased her out into the rain was something that should never have been anyone's business, but the whole world had made it their business anyway, and how she'd stood in her trailer and thought, very calmly, if I don't walk out that door right now, I am going to disappear the permanent way instead of the temporary way. I didn't have words big enough for that, so I did the only thing I know how to do when the words won't come. I baked her something warm and put it in her hands. It turned out that was the right thing. It turned out that had always been the right thing. I'd just never met anybody starved enough to show me. Opal Reyes has been the first customer at Bell's Bakery every single morning for 11 years. She's 76, sharp as a tack, buys one seeded roll and a small rye and sits in the corner and misses nothing. And the third morning Nell was there, helping me at the counter with her hood up, Opal took one long look at her over her glasses. And I saw something flicker across the old woman's face, and I braced, and then Opal just said, warm as anything, morning, dear, you've got flour on your ear, and bought her roll, and sat down and said not one word more. She knew. I found that out later. Opal Reyes knew exactly who was standing behind my counter, had known from the first morning, because unlike me, Opal reads her magazines, and she said nothing, protected the girl's secret without being asked, because Opal Reyes is a better person than most, and understood something it took me longer to learn. I learned it on the 8th day, and I learned it hard. I ran out of the good bread flour and went down to the market myself for once, midday, and there by the register was a wall of magazines and newspapers, and on every single one of them was a face I'd been handing rye bread to for a week. Where is Vivienne Vale? Vivienne Vale vanishes. the hunt for Vivienne. And her face, my Nell's face, professionally lit and glossy, and 100 feet from the girl with flour on her ear, staring out from every rack. I stood there in the market holding a bag of flour and felt the bottom drop out of my week. Because of course, I'm not a stupid man. I put it together standing right there. The 15 years and the committee and the man in the lobby and the dead phone and can I hide here just for tonight? She wasn't Nell. She was the most famous woman in the country, and she had washed up in my bakery the way a queen might shelter in a bus stop out of the rain. And the second the storm passed, she would step back into the limousine of her actual life and be gone, and I would be exactly what I have always been, the warm place people stop on their way to somewhere else. The bakery, not the man. I walked home with the flour and my heart in my shoes. She saw my face the second I came up the stairs. She's an actress. Reading faces is the job. You know, she said quietly, standing up from the couch. You saw. The whole market saw, I said. You're Nell, you're her. You're Vivienne Vale. You should have. And then I stopped. Because I didn't know how to finish it, you should have told me. When what I actually meant was I let myself think you were just a girl who liked my bread, and now I have to stop. And I did the thing I always do. I got quiet and careful, and I started, already, to hand her back to the world. Look, I said, in a voice I hated, a reasonable voice, a stepping aside voice. It's all right, I get it. You needed to disappear, and my door was open. That's fine, that's what the door's for. But you've got a whole life out there tearing the country apart looking for you, and a bakery in Harmon isn't. This isn't your real life, Nell, Vivienne, whoever. You should call somebody. Get back to it. I won't tell a soul you were here. You were never here. And I watched her face, and I did not understand, in that moment, that I had just done to her the exact thing that had been done to her by every single person for 15 years. I had looked at the poster instead of the girl. I had handed Vivienne Vale back her cage and called it kindness. The light went out of her the same way it had come in reverse, and she said, in a flat-wrecked voice, "Right, yeah, of course. You're right. It's not my real life." And she went and put her hoodie back on and pulled up the hood and became the thing on the magazines again right in front of me. And I stood in my own kitchen and let her, because I was so busy protecting myself from being left that I forgot people can be left standing right in front of you. It was Opal who set me straight, because of course it was. She came up the back stairs that evening uninvited, which she has never once done in 11 years, and she stood in my kitchen with her handbag over her arm and said, "Where is she? She's leaving. Probably gone by now. She should be with her people. Opal, not hiding in a—" "You blessed fool of a boy," Opal said, and there was steel in it. I have known who that girl was since the first morning. I've watched her whole life on those magazine racks for 15 years since she was a child, and do you know what I have never once seen in a single photograph until this week? I have never seen her look like a person. Not once. And then she spends a week in your bakery with flour on her ear, being nobody, being fed, being asked for nothing, and she starts to look like a girl again instead of a product, and the very second you found out her name, you did exactly what the other 15 years did. You saw the famous one and stopped seeing the tired one who likes your rye. You handed her back. Opal stepped closer. You keep telling this whole town you're just the bakery, Jonah Bell, the warm thing people pass through. Your grandmother would take a rolling pin to you. That girl did not hide in a bakery. She hid in you. Out of every lit window in this town, she knocked on the door with a man behind it who hands people the best part of the bread and asks for nothing back. And you are about to be the 1,001st person in her life to love the poster and let the girl walk out into the rain. Now I am old, and I did not climb these stairs for exercise. Go find her before that manager of hers does, and this time see the one who likes your rye. I ran. 2 in the morning is my hour, but I have never moved through Harmon like I moved that evening. And I found her at the bus station on Elm, on a bench in her hood with a paper ticket in her hand and her dead phone in her lap, waiting to be carried back to the machine. And out front of the station I saw with a lurch was a black car and a man in an expensive coat scanning the street, her manager, Damien, the human face of the whole apparatus, come to collect his property. He hadn't spotted her yet. I got to her first. I sat down on the bench beside her, out of breath, flour still on my sleeves, and she looked at me, startled, guarded, already gone behind the hood, and I said the thing I should have said in the kitchen, the thing it took a 76-year-old woman with a rolling pin to knock loose. I was wrong, I said. In the flat, I looked at the magazines instead of at you, and that's the one thing you came to my door to get away from, and I did it inside of an hour, and I'm sorrier than I know how to say. Here's the truth, Nell, and I'm calling you Nell because that's who you are to me and always will be. I got scared. I have spent my whole life believing I'm the warm place people stop on their way to somewhere else. The bakery and not the man, and when I found out the girl in my kitchen was the most wanted woman in the country, the scared part of me decided you were just hiding in the warmth same as everybody, and that the second the rain stopped you'd go because nobody stays for the baker. So I handed you back before you could leave, because being the one who lets go hurts a little less than being the one who's left. And it was a coward's move, and I'm done being a coward. I don't care about Vivienne Vale. I never met her. I met Nell, who's bad at kneading and cries over rye bread and got flour on her ear, and I see her, right now, under that hood, and I am not going to be one more person who looks at the poster. You don't have to stay. You've got a whole world, and I've got an oven. But I couldn't let you get on that bus thinking the one place you felt safe handed you back. You didn't hide in a bakery, Nell. You hid in me. And my door opens at 2 in the morning for the rest of my life. For the girl, never the poster, whether you get on that bus or not. She was crying again, the real way, the way she had over the first loaf, and she said, "You called me Vivienne." In the kitchen. You looked at me like the rest of them and you called me Vivienne, and I thought, not him too, please. Not him. I know, I said. I'll spend a long time being sorry for that word. And across the street, Damien spotted us and started over calling her name, her other name, her product name, brisk and proprietary. Vivienne, thank God. We've got a car. We need to manage this. Come on. And Nell looked at him and looked at me. And I watched something settle in her that I think had been trying to settle for 15 years. She stood up. But she didn't walk to the car. She walked to Damien and she said, in a voice that did not shake, "I'm not coming back to it, not the way it was. You can tell them I'm alive and I'm fine and I'm taking my life back, and if the studio wants to talk about the film, they can talk to me directly, not through you, because you're fired, Damien. I should have done it years ago. I'm keeping the work. I'm losing the cage." And Damien sputtered about contracts and optics, and I watched the most famous woman in the country turn her back on him mid-sentence and walk back to a night baker on a bus station bench and take my flour-dusted hand in both of hers and say, "I don't want to hide anymore. I'm tired of hiding. But I would like, very much, to come home, if the door still opens." "It opens," I said. "It was always going to open." And there on a bench outside a bus station on Elm Street, with her fired manager gaping behind us and the first gray of dawn coming up over Harmon, she leaned in and kissed me, tasting of rain and rye and 15 years of wanting to be nobody, and I held on to her like a man who had finally, at 33, been chosen and not just visited. And I felt the whole long story I'd told myself about being the bakery and not the man come apart in my hands like proof dough. Some man drove by and honked. Somewhere a bird started up. I did not care. I had a girl in my arms who liked my rye and had walked away from the whole world to sit on a bench with me, and there is no red carpet on earth worth that. We did not run off into a simple ending. Because there isn't one for a life like hers. Being with Nell means the world knows her face, and it means weeks she's away on a film, and it means the first year a stretch of paparazzi parked outside Bell's Bakery until Harmon, God love this town, closed ranks so hard and so kindly around the two of us that the photographers gave up and went to bother somebody easier. But she came home. Between films, she comes home to the flat over the bakery, and she bakes with me at 2 a.m, still terrible at kneading, and Harmon protects her the way small towns protect their own, and to everybody on 2nd and Vine, she's just Nell. Jonah's Nell, who likes the rye. The town's protection was a thing to behold. When the photographers first camped out front, old Pete, who runs the hardware store, started parking his delivery truck to block their shots. The high school kids learned to spot a long lens at 50 yards and would casually stand in front of it. Opal told one reporter with a completely straight face that Vivienne Vale had never set foot in Harmon and he ought to try Millerville, and sent the entire press corps 40 minutes in the wrong direction. Nobody was paid to do any of it. They just decided she was one of theirs and closed the door on the rest, and I watched a woman who'd been public property since she was 9 learn, slowly, in a town nobody's heard of, what it feels like to be kept a secret out of love instead of shame. She cried about that, too, the first time she understood what they were doing for her. She cries a lot more than the magazines would ever believe, my Nell. It's one of the ways I know I got the real one. There's a photograph on the wall of the flat now, the only one either of us cares about, and it's not from any red carpet. Opal took it on her little phone one dawn, the two of us behind the counter, both dusted white with flour, Nell mid-laugh with icing on her chin and her head tipped against my shoulder, and you cannot tell, looking at it, that the woman in the picture is worth anything to anyone but the man beside her. Which is the whole point. It's the first picture ever taken of her, she says, where she's nobody. She had it framed. Opal Reyes still comes every morning for her seeded roll and her small rye, and she and Nell are thick as thieves now, and once a month or so Opal reminds me, with enormous satisfaction, that she knew from the first morning, and that I am, and I quote, the last man in America to recognize a movie star. And I let her have it, because she climbed those stairs when it mattered. Nell reads scripts now she actually wants to do, and she does them her way, and she says the strangest thing about the whole business is that she can walk out onto a set and be Vivienne Vale all day, and it doesn't cost her anything anymore. Because she knows there's a bakery in a town nobody's heard of, where a man will be up at 2 a.m. with the ovens lit and the best part of the bread. Saved for the girl, not the poster. I asked her once, late in the flour and the oven warmth, why she knocked on my door that night, out of the whole building, and she said, it was the only one with a light on. But I've thought about it, and I don't think that's really it. I think I'd been looking for a door like yours my whole life, and I just didn't know it until I was standing in the rain in front of it. Somebody who'd hand me warm bread and not ask who I was. You didn't rescue Vivienne Vale, Jonah. Nobody can. You just fed a tired girl at 2 a.m. and let her be nobody. And it turns out that's the only thing I ever actually wanted. I think about that a lot. Down in the shop in the dark, my hands in the dough, the town asleep and one light on. About how I spent my whole life believing I was the warm thing in the background that nobody chooses, and how it turned out that being the warm thing was never the problem. The problem was believing nobody would ever knock. She knocked on the wrong door at 2 a.m, and it turned out to be the only right one, and she stayed. And I am not the bakery. I am the man, and I know it now, at last, because somebody looked past the flour and chose him. So here's what I've got for you if you've read this far into a quiet baker's story. If you've told yourself you're just the background of other people's lives, the warm, easy thing nobody falls for, the door people pass through on their way to somewhere better. This is me telling you from the far side of nearly handing my whole heart back into the rain, you don't know who's about to knock. You don't know who's been looking their whole life for exactly the warmth you've decided doesn't count. Keep the light on, open the door, and when somebody scared and soaked and tired stands on your landing at 2 a.m, hand them the best part of the bread and don't ask who they are, because the person who needs to be nobody in your kitchen might just turn out to be the one who finally sees that you were somebody all along. I almost missed mine because I was too sure no one stays for the baker. Don't be as slow as I was. And if you'd stay a while longer with us, subscribe and let the next story keep you company. There's always a warm light on here at Lamplight, and the kettle's on, and the first loaf's nearly ready, and the best part of it is yours.